Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on 20 tips and tricks to elevate your visualizations. My name is Jeff Hainsworth, and I'm a Senior Solutions Architect here at Dundas, who will be running this webinar. Now, the target audience for today will be on people who are already using Dundas, specifically building content with Dundas, and my goal will be to show you some ideas that you might consider building into your own projects. So do keep in mind, a lot of what I'm going to show you today will be relatively unpolished. I'm going to show you very quickly how to get through these. I do have a lot that I want to cover, so many of these will not go into really great detail, but the webinar will be recorded, so you are welcome to come back and see what we've done. And if you have any particular questions that you want to raise to me, feel free to drop them directly into the chat. During this webinar, I won't be able to address questions directly simply because we have so much content that we need to get through. But we will have people looking at the chat, and if we can give you an answer, we absolutely can. If it's going to take a little while, we will email you back as well. And also, you're welcome to drop me an email directly if you have any questions. My email is jeffh@dundas.com. So let's get right into it. So one of the first things that I want to show you is this idea of what I would call compound visualizations. And the point behind this is you don't necessarily have to have just a single visualization, like just a big chart, just a large table, a gauge on your dashboard. You can take simple things, like start with a rectangle and put that onto your dashboard. Give it a color. So I'm just going to go in here with my properties and I'll make it something bright, something fun. Maybe a purple or something like that. Grab an image, something that's going to give some kind of context to what you're displaying. So in my case, I'm just going to use this little rate icon that we created. You can find a lot of these on various free sites if you don't have a graphic artist who can make these for you. Right? It's pretty easy to add a black to it. And go in and change the opacity of the image. If you start dropping it down to something really subtle, like 30%, it's just there to give you an idea of what this metric means. Right? Obviously, I haven't chosen the best image here if I'm working with something like sales data, but anything that's meaningful for you. Let's get some data. Let's start by putting a number on here. So I just grab my revenue, and I'm going to shrink that down, and I'm going to turn it into a label. So just a simple data label. And let's go to our properties and make it quite a bit bigger. I'll make it white, and then start blowing it up. So something like that. Probably give it a title somewhere on the screen as well. It's also really nice if you use just a mini visualization. For example, take that revenue, let's add date to it. So I'm going to take the month portion of the date, drag that in, and then I'm going to turn this one into a line. And the thing about a line chart, you can see my labels are taking up a lot of space right now because it wasn't meant to be this small. But if you go in there and you turn off the axes, so go to your bottom axes, disable that. Go to your top axes, or left, sorry, disable that as well. Right, you can just get a simple line. And that line is just giving you an idea of direction. Is the data going up or is it going down? You don't need to provide a lot of detail here. Let's just set the look. And I've just used a simple white on here. You might also add a state indicator, right? Give me a number or an arrow pointing up or down, whether this is good or bad. As I said, put a title in. But a series of these simple, small combination visualizations look really good on a dashboard. And also do some drill down, right? They click somewhere on here, you do a layer and you pop up, and then you show kind of the traditional view, a large chart that you might want to see. Will allow you to get more simplistic, overview style visualizations on your dashboard. So definitely one worth taking a look at. So another one you might do is actually add a loading overlay to your dashboard. I thought this one was a pretty cool one. So let's go back here. I'm just going to open a quick tab, and I found a really neat site that you might play with, just called loading.io. And these guys provide free customized loading indicators. I'm not endorsing any of these free sites here, but there's a ton out here. You're welcome to use whatever you'd like. But let's add a gear. I want us to have that as a loading page. I'll make it a bit bigger. I want to start with a blue color, and I want the second one to be green. And I want to set it to be a bit slower, something like that. So you start customizing it the way you want it to appear. Oops, I lost my green. There we go. And generate an SVG out of it. So you can just download this. And if you open that SVG file that downloads, you can see it rendering. I can just view source, right-click view source on it, and I can copy this code. I'll bring that back to your dashboard. That one there. And let's add a loading layer. So I'm going to add a layer to the dashboard. Add. I'll just call this loading. And in terms of content, maybe the first thing I want is I'm going to throw a big rectangle over the whole screen. Right? Because I want it to appear semi-transparent. So I take that rectangle and we set the opacity to be like 80%. So you can kind of see through it. Right? Maybe I'll make it black to start. Something like that. So play with it till it looks the way you want. Right? In order to get that loading indicator on here, add an HTML label control. Place it wherever you want. And if you go to the text property for that label control, you can paste in that code that we just took from the gear. And you'll see that it'll actually render directly on the dashboard. So that's what the user's going to see while it's loading. And all you have to do is check in the dashboard in a state where this loading layer is showing. And then, of course, we don't want it to always be there. Once the dashboard's ready, it should disappear. So I go to my properties. And on the ready interaction, I'm just going to tell it to change layer. And with that, you can see that I can tell it to hide the loading layer once it's done loading. Now, if I view this dashboard and I hit enter to reload it, you'll see it'll show up really quickly. My loading time wasn't too bad here. And loading icon shows up and disappears as soon as it's done loading. So it's a zero code way to add your own custom loading screen to your dashboard. So real-time data. I would wager that a lot of you guys do have data that's real-time that would work on a dashboard. And we support this really well. If you just take a table here, so I've just got, in my case, various lines. These are manufacturing. So it's just showing a work line. And then if I bring the status code in here, so it's basically just showing, is it running at 100% capacity or not? All right, let's turn that into a bar chart. And if you go and edit the data set, first thing you're going to want to do is turn off the data cache. We put this on for performance reasons, right? So it holds the data. But the last thing you want it to do is be trying to hold your data and not update. So turn it off. And if you go to your properties, you'll see that we have an auto refresh interval. So if I set that to maybe 3 seconds, as I view this dashboard, you're going to see it update in the fly. Right, something like that. But you can also improve it quite a bit. If I go to my data tools and I add a state to this, so I set up state, and I just call it status based on line status, and I'm just adding one state to this very quickly. So something is considered low if it's less than equal to, let's just say 30. So I'm just going to put a constant in here. And when I hit visual, you'll see it'll go and do the coloring. The other thing you probably want to do if you're working with a chart like this is go and fix the scale. Right? So if I go to my left axis and I tell it that the custom maximum, where's the property? There it is 100. It won't constantly move based on the values. It'll just stay in a fixed window of 100. And now you'll see when I hit preview, I get this nice window where I can very quickly see the status of my various operations. So let's just shrink that down and get it out of the way. I'll keep it on the screen for now. So here's another one. Did you know that you can bring in your own custom fonts onto a dashboard? So let's go back to the dashboard. And if you just run over to fonts.google.com, right, there's plenty of fonts providers, but this is an easy one to work with. it gives you a list where you can select any fonts that you want to use. So there's a lot of neat ones in here. Let's say maybe I'm interested in this Bungee font. If you click the plus button and open it up, it will actually give you an embed code. And if you just copy that, bring it back to your dashboard, easiest way to make this work is just to add one of those HTML labels and put it somewhere on the screen. It doesn't even have to be on visible areas. And if I go to my properties and I change the text again, instead of rendering the word HTML label, I want it to run that download link. So you see that that label has nothing in it. If I deselect it, people don't even know it's there. But now you'll see that I can actually come in here and under font, right, we list the ones that are always there, but I can now type in the name of the font that I wanted, Bungee. And I now have my own custom font rendering. So you can bring in thousands of fonts available online directly into Dundas with a very quick label control that's added to the screen. So really easy to do. All right, this next one is all about actually extending that whole idea of the Google fonts, where we're using that label control in order to render HTML content. Did you know that you can actually bring in a scrolling news feed onto your dashboard? So something like this. Let's take the HTML label again, drag it onto the screen, and just run it across the bottom. So something like that. And first of all, I'm just going to play with the fonts a little bit. So let's make this a bit bigger. Right, something like that again. Choose the font family, color, however you want to see it. And again, using the HTML, you can use a Marquee tab. And this is just supported by the HTML5 environment. Paste whatever content you want into it. So just open and close the tab. Oops, spell it correctly. And I'm just going to put in some news here. So let's just paste that in directly. And you'll notice now, as I view the dashboard, it just starts running that news information directly across the side. Now, usually you would bind this to data, which you can do. This control does support placeholders, where you can pull in data information. But you can have absolutely anything scrolling across your screen just by surrounding it in a Marquee tab. If you want images or anything like that to be added, it's supported as well. So very easy, nice little add that you can get for your dashboard. So I've got one more based on the same concept of using that HTML label. And this one allows you to do your own custom navigation within the dashboard. So let's go back to the dashboard. And I'm just going to make a little bit of space here at the top. So we'll add another one of those HTML label controls. So you can see this is a really fun control to use when it comes to extending the dashboard. Properties, text, and I'm going to paste in a large amount of CSS code here. So you can see I'm creating a style, and it's just overriding the behavior of the drop-down and the various content, and even the A tag that we're using. And this is what's going to be actually rendered in the control. So it's just going to be a div with a button and the word home. So there's the first control. Now by adding this styling code to the dashboard, it makes it very easy for me to come in here and then add maybe a second control. Right? And in this one, now that all that styling code's in here, I can just use the rendering of it. So I add, right, and I've got my button that they can click on, which will bring up a div tag. And that div tag will give me a list of links. So these are links to your other dashboards. So all you have to do is fill in the right URL for these, the ones that you want to see, and add as many as you'd like. And now you'll see as I mouse over, I can see the links, and I can click, and I can drill down to the dashboard that I want to see. So anyone who's interested in that code, do feel free to drop me an email. As I said, jeffh@dundas.com. I'll be happy to share it with you. But the point is, you can put any HTML code you want in here in order to extend these sort of things and build your own menus. Right? You may do something very different. You're not stuck with just using what we provide out of the box. All right, this next one that I'm going to show you is actually one of my favorites. And it's the idea of using filters to have what-if analysis on the dashboard. So let me give you the idea. Let's get some data on here. So in my case, I'm just going to bring in some revenue numbers. So there's revenue. And I want to see that compared to cost of sale. Drag that in. And let's group it by, I don't know, continent. Doesn't really matter. And I'm going to turn this into a set of bar charts. Okay, so 2 bars. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to add a formula to this dashboard. Let's shrink that down a bit. And using my data tools, I add a formula. And I'm kind of making this up, but let's just say that revenue divided by cost of sale plus a constant is something that I'm interested in. So let's just say plus 200. Okay, I'll put this in brackets. So that's a new generated series that I've got in here. Okay, and I might even go and put that series on its own secondary axis so that I can view it a bit cleaner. So I'll just say new right axis. Okay, so that third one calculated, as you can see. Now what I want to do is I want the user to be able to control the constant that's being put in there. So I'm going to add a filter control. It's just a slider. Let's just add that to the bottom. And just for now, I'm going to disconnect it from everything. And then let's go back to our formula. So I edit the formula. And instead of just saying plus 200, I'm just going to say placeholder. And you'll see when I do this, right, that placeholder is assumed to be at 0. So it's not changing anything. Let's set up the filter. So I want this filter to start at 0, and I want the maximum to be maybe 100,000. Okay. Now let's take that filter and connect it to the chart. So in this case, it's just called chart 3. You can see the formula in there. So if you expand the formula, you'll see there's 2 options. Hook it up to the single number option. And actually, you should probably set a default on it. My default's 0, which is fine. But now when I hit view, I can come in here and I could say, all right, I want to set it to 66,000 something as the constant. So the user is able to choose inputs that go into the formula. Like with real time, you probably want to fix the scale here because it's a bit strange that it's resizing every time I put it in. It's kind of defeating the purpose. But you have full control over that. But this will really allow the user to get involved and input their own values into a formula. So definitely a neat one. Let's format that up a bit. Moving on, the histogram is kind of an extension of what I just showed you, but it gives you a nice new tool that you can use also in order to visualize your data a little bit differently. So let me show you what I mean. Back to our dashboard again. I'm going to start by getting some raw data in here. So I'll just take country and take my revenue again. And I want to know how this data was distributed. So how many sales were between 0 and 500, 1,000 to 2,000, that type of thing. Like actually counting the data based on various buckets. So to do this, we've added a new control called the, as the name suggests, histogram. So you select that base data and you tell it to revisualize to a histogram. And you can see in doing this, I can now remove that base one, by the way. It added a new control to the dashboard. So let's get that on and shrink it down. And that new control is counting up, in this case, the number of sales I had for between 0 and 1,000, right? 10,000, 20,000. So most of my sales are very small. That's what it's telling me. Just align these a bit better. There you go. But what I wanted to show you is that you can also control the way this visualization works using something like the slider. So let's grab a filter again. Let's add our slider. Disconnect it like I did before. Also put this one underneath. And this slider, I don't need it to be as big, I think. So let's just say 0 to maybe 50,000. Okay. And you can even set the increments, which would probably make a lot more sense in this one, but for brevity's sake, I'm going to skip it. But you'll notice if you go into the data for the histogram, it's using a formula. And as part of that formula, it tells you, I want to calculate for revenue, and I want to see, and there's a bin size parameter. This bin size parameter can also be a placeholder, right? I'll just type in PL for placeholder. Just like I did with the what if. Say OK, and in this case, now I'm going to hook it up to the filter. So let's find that chart again, just like I did before, hook it up to the single number parameter. And now the user can come in and control the distribution, right? If I wanted buckets of 0 to 6,800, I can do that, right? Smaller or larger buckets, 26,000 buckets, right? So it allows me to control that distribution. So you can really push some of that power down to the user who's maybe looking for some self-service capabilities on the dashboard. Definitely a fan of this one. All right, reading metric sets. This one is a little bit more developer-y, if you don't mind, but I wanted to show you that you can actually query a metric set directly on a dashboard. For those of you who aren't familiar with the idea of a metric set, it's kind of a pre-built visualization and query put together. Like when I was dropping this chart onto the screen and I added revenue and cost of sale and a formula, that's a metric set. But you can also save these. So this one's sitting in the dashboard. It's just living as part of it. But you can have a collection of metric sets that are already there. So I've got a few in here. All right. Now, just to show you, I do have a pre-built sample that I can bring up. But the idea here is using script without ever putting that metric set on the dashboard, you can read it and get access to the data behind it. So this can be really useful if you wanted to just do anything with that data. You want to just bring it in. I want it as a script value so that I can play with it. You might want to use this as part of the news feed for scrolling Marquee, or you're building your own visualization and you want to pull data from an existing metric set. So knowing how to query it is important. So I'm just really showing you today that it is possible to do. I'll give you a really quick walkthrough of the code, but I don't want to go too deep with this. But the whole idea is if I click read metric set in the sample, you can see that it reads from the metric set. It's referencing it by the ID, so it's easy to get at. And then it's telling me, in this case, what's in it. What kind of columns, what are the rows, what are the cells. This is that real-time data sample that I created for you. But let's just take a look at what's going on under that button. So if I go to the button and I go to the click event, there's a script in here. And the script's actually not that complex, right? It figures out what metric set we're looking at. This is just where it's outputting, which label you're using. And then we create a request object, right? So the request needs to know which metric set we're talking about. Do you want paging? So if there's millions of data points, do you want it to send back data in increments? In my case, I just said, send me everything. Then you get this retrieval service, and you basically make this call to get data. And once you've done that, it will return a promise, which you can put any code you want here. So in my case, I'm just kind of looping through the various cell sets for columns and rows and returning information into that label. So just be aware that this is here because this is a stepping stone in terms of building some very complex and interesting visualizations if you wanted to go down that route. So you're definitely not limited to just what we provide out of the box. Our script. This is an interesting one. So what I want to show you here is that you can use the external R language. And if you guys are running SQL Server 2016, if anyone's playing with that yet, they've actually built in the ability to call out to the R libraries directly. If you're not familiar with what R is, it's a set of statistical and analytical packages that you can use to actually extend your data. So let me give you an example of what you might do here. This is a neat one because it actually shows some text analytics with the dashboard. So I'm going to build a new data cube. Actually, I'll just do it on this tab here. New data cube. And I'm going to paste in my own manual select on top of a SQL server. So I just select that, and I paste in the R script here. So just give you a quick idea of what's going on here. Right, since SQL Server added in that stored procedure to work with R, you can basically just call this exec external script. You tell it that it's using the R language, and then R has its own query language. So I've just put in a query here that allows me to pull out common words. So I have a set of data here, and it's just survey responses. Right, so I love the product. The product was great. I had following issues with this thing that I purchased. Those types of responses are what we're looking at here. But the idea is that using this R script, I can actually get a count of the number of occurrences of certain words that are happening to do some actual text analytics. Now, for any of you guys who are really good with SQL, this is something that is extremely difficult to do, that R actually handles very easily. So this will allow you to actually take in new data insights by doing something like this. So let's take that select that we've created. Let's save it. And now you'll see this actually outputs 2 columns for me. One thing I forgot to do, because I'm running this query, you need to remove subquery optimization. Dundas tries to optimize the query, and this is one that it's certainly not going to be able to optimize. So just turn that off. And here you can see that it's gone and found the common words. Now, the interesting thing that you'll see here is words like at, the, and, those types of things have been stripped out. So R is actually intelligent enough to remove those common prepositions, because it would absolutely pollute the result if I were to return nothing but those types of terms. So you can see that things are popping out like helpful, right? Names of the company, resolved, right? Those ideas. So I found this really interesting because it's just a different way of analyzing data that a lot of people just don't do. And it's certainly possible with Dundas. And by the way, if you're not running SQL Server 2016, we have an R node that you can add. And you can add R scripts directly. The only thing about this one is instead of using the SQL Server, it calls out to a third-party R server that you would be running. So you configure Dundas to talk to this R server. So it's just 2 ways of doing the same thing. Right? But I find that SQL makes it so easy now that they've embedded it. All right, this next one, third-party visualizations, isn't really a tip, I'd say, in this case. This is more of, I'm going to show you an extension of what I just did with that R script, where I was able to pull out the frequency of various words that were counted on the screen, because I want to show you that you can bring in external visuals in order to enhance the dashboard. Now keep in mind, there's a bunch of code here that was already written, and this is more geared towards a developer who would want to come in and do their own. But let me show you just how cool this is, and once the script is written, just how powerful it could be. And you could make this even easier than what I'm doing. I'm just showing you kind of a loose approach. But let's take our data cube that we just created, and I want to see all the words. Let's just drag that in, and I want to see the frequency. So that's my measure. I'm just going to really quickly go in and churn off the totals, because that's not something that I need to see with this data. And that's fine. Then I'm going to take a rectangle and add that to the screen. And I'm just going to tell it to fill the bottom here. We'll select that rectangle. Great. So now let's go to my properties and ready. And I'm going to add a script. So I've just pasted the first one in here already. This is a script that basically enables the control. So let's drop that in. The second one that I'm going to add will actually call our data binding code. So remember that metric set reading that I showed you? It's using essentially that concept, but it's attaching it to a third-party control. And what's going to happen when this runs is it's going to actually go and it's going to replace that rectangle with a visualization. So let's just go and add it and rerun it. And you'll notice now when the dashboard runs, that visualization is now a D3 library word tag cloud. Right, that you can use. That's actually showing you which words are used the most commonly. And I might even take that concept I showed you before about taking certain words, right, and not words, sorry, taking certain controls and overlaying them. Let's do that. Let's drop that on. Let's change this to horizontal. right? And maybe I'll just get rid of the zoom really quickly. Let's hit view. Oh, the control's on top. Sorry, let me just move that out of the way. There we go. View. Zoom out. And maybe I want to overlay, right? I'd probably change the color here, do something like that, and make it fit a bit nicer. But I could actually have both the chart, and maybe I sort it. So let's go here to the top and sort by frequency. So let's just set up our own custom sort rule. Sorry, wrong option. There it is. So I just want to sort. Oops, that wasn't the right option. Apologies. Totals. Custom sort. There it is. Sorry. And let's just sort it descending. So I can see the most common words in there. Right. And you probably simplify this even further. Maybe change this to a top 10 or something like that. But the whole idea is I'm now overlying these two controls so that it does the tag club, but then also shows me the traditional bar chart that you might want to see. So really neat that you can bring in those third-party controls. Keep in mind, though, it does take quite a bit of code to get these written in the first place. With D3, a lot of the samples have already been written for you because people have implemented these all over the net. So it's really just a matter of finding the JavaScript that works for you because it's meant to be an open community. So that'll work really well, and certainly bring those in and enhance your dashboards with it. Okay, advanced mapping. So this is the same idea as the third-party visualization that I showed you. But I wanted to bring in the concept that you can actually bring in like a Bing or a Google or an Esri map into Dundas in order to get a deeper level of mapping. Right? The maps that Dundas provide, they're there to fill a very specific purpose. We're very good at the whole choropleth map, meant to be in a dashboard, right? It's the high-level view. It's the breakdown by continent, by country, even by things like zip code if you wanted to go that low. But we're not a full mapping provider, and Dundas is never going to be able to provide the types of detail that someone like Google, who collects images of street level, bird's eye view, that type of thing. But believe it or not, we can still use those controls within Dundas, right? It's just a matter of integrating it into the dashboard very similarly to what I just showed you with third-party visualizations. So let me actually show you what that looks like. We do have a sample here, which is showing you how you can embed a Bing map directly into Dundas. So in this case, we're showing earthquake information. So I can see where various earthquakes are taking place, and you'll notice that I can drill right down to the street level if I wanted to see that. Right? I could even do the whole bird's eye view that they offer. This is very different than the type of data visualization map that we're offering, but still has value, especially if you're going to add things like symbols. They also do heat mapping, things like that. So quite a bit available to you. Now, if you want to do something like this, if you just go over to our support site, so dundas.com/support, there's a full article on how to create it. So just type it, do a search for Bing, and it should get you what you want. Yeah, first article that comes up. And this will give you a full walkthrough on how to embed a Bing map directly into your own dashboard. So definitely worth checking out. So diagrams. Diagrams are actually something that's built into our map control that I see very few people using, but it's actually something extremely unique that Dundas provides. And you can get some really nice effect out of it. So let me show you how that works. Let's just go back over to our dashboard. And in the case of this one, I'm just going to build a new dashboard. I think that one that I was creating for you guys is getting a little bit full in terms of visualizations. But what happens is, typically when you use our map, the expectation is that you're going to bring in your own geographical file, right? An Esri shape file that provides landmass data. But a lot of people don't realize the map actually also has a subset called a diagram that we support. And if I bring one of these diagrams in that I've already got, well, guess what? This is a floor plan, right? Which you could attach data to. So if you take a look at the names in here, if I look at my shapes, instead of having right, Canada, United States, Mexico, I've got Bay 1, Bay 0, Bay 3, that kind of thing. And these are different work areas. And you'll notice that we have full dashboards. We'll actually color this entire diagram. So you can see the status in real time of various areas on the diagram. You could also do this in order to show business processes. So if you think of a Visio diagram that you wanted to bring in. You can actually draw it out using our diagram and then bind data to it on the dashboard. So it's not just geographical. And again, this is a huge advantage that we have over someone like a Bing who is only geographical maps. So one thing that I really wish people would explore more. I've even seen people do things like stadium seating. You draw the whole stadium and we're showing concession sales for different areas, things like that. Like, you have as much control here as your imagination provides in terms of the data. So really neat options. All right, for those of you who are not developers, I do apologize for some of the last ones that I showed you. But this one here, and actually the next couple, will be things that you can do in the dashboard designer that don't require all that coding, really to add extension to the dashboard. But this is a really neat one, data images. So Dundas added, I'm going to zoom this guy out first. There's my new diagram. I'll make it that size. Dundas added the ability to create data images directly and bind it within our system. So you'll notice that there's a control under data visualization that's called data image. Don't confuse this with the image control that's under components, because the idea behind this one is that it's drawing the image directly from a database. So let me give you an idea of how this works. Here's my database. Pick that table. Actually, sorry, it's this table. And in this one, I've actually got an image stored in the database. So let's just take that image. Let's drop that in. And you can see an image of a person shows up. But what you need to understand is this is hooked up to the actual data. This isn't being streamed directly from a URL or something like that. So I could add a slicer to it. Let's add sales rep name. And then I'm just going to hook up a quick filter to that slicer. Right, and let's just hook that up to sales rep name, not image. And now I can come in and choose the sales rep that I want to show. Right, so this is a dynamic image that's loading. On that same subject, I wanted to show you that the actual data table itself can be expanded to do this type of thing. And there's also special types of columns that I don't see being used as often, which are quite neat. So same idea. I'm going to use two tables here. So let's take my revenue in here. I want to see how much revenue happened for each salesperson. So grab the revenue. I'll grab their name, which comes out of that table. Join that together. Take the image, drop that on. And you'll notice when putting image in here, it just ends up as this big long string. Right? And by the way, just like before, I'm going to turn off the totals. I just want to see the raw data here. Okay. And if I flatten this table out, instead of doing these grouping categories, right, hit that button there, you'll notice if you click on the table, you go to your properties. Under image, right, there's a list of all the columns in here. If I choose image, that's the name of the column, by the way. There's an image type that you can use. And by choosing that, it's actually using that dynamic image directly in the data grid. So that now I can see all my salespeople directly. Just kind of neat. The other thing you can do is maybe put their targets in here. Right? Let's go to state. So set up states. And let's say that your target, let's call it target, based on revenue, is, I didn't look at these values. Hopefully the number I choose is okay. I'll just say low is going to be 100,000. So the assumption is every sales rep here brings in at least $100,000 worth of revenue. Actually, that's well under. Oh, there we go. This one person showed up. Never mind. But what I want to show you, that state will color the table, as you can see. But what you can also add is a state indicator column. So if I add a new column here, and instead of calling it header, I can rename it. You'll notice that I can choose state indicator. Right? And you can actually customize how that indicator is going to look. So you can set the height and width. Maybe I want something a bit smaller. Right? That's a bit more reasonable. I can set my text. I can set how wide this is going to be in terms of the header. But let's go back into that column. Let's customize the state indicator. And you can see the various states that get added. So I have a low state and I have a default style. Default means it just fell out of range. So let's just say if they're not low, that's a good thing. So I'll just give it a green. Right? And you can even choose various controls that we offer. Maybe you want an up arrow, a left arrow, a right arrow. You could put your own images in here if you wanted. You want a happy face, something like that. Right? Let's put a smirk in there. Right? Good job, they made their targets, right? Or even just a check mark, something simple. Right? It's all supported. Where's check? There it is. Right? But let's also style that low state. So maybe in the case of this one, I'll go to my look. I want to see a cross, just as an X. Again, setting the size if you want. There's also animation properties. You could tell it to animate. So see how it's blinking now if you want to draw attention. So there's lots of neat properties in here that you can control for the user. Another thing you might do, if I add another numeric into here, let's add cost of sale. And I go to that column type again. Just double click on the column will get you there very quickly. And, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to get out of there. Change the column type to bullet graph. This will actually embed in a visualization into the table. So you can get some very advanced visuals very quickly just using the data table control. And this will also work with states too, so if you wanted to add targets and things like that. So just an easy way to add a lot to your dashboard very quickly. All right, template expansion. So anybody who's using a template grid within Dundas can actually expand and collapse certain regions of the dashboard that you want to see. Sorry, where's my dashboard? There it is. There's the one we were working on. So the whole idea is you have a top section that may be expandable or collapsible. So just by using the template grid, you can define regions. You can actually make the dashboard a 3x3, 3x2, something like that type of dashboard. I'm going to show you, I think, just a sample of this very quickly. There is documentation on this directly if you want to see how it's done. And it's all on our support side under just expand collapse. But here's the idea. Instead of making it a 3x3 or a 3x2, we made a very small, kind of 1 high by 1 dashboard. So this filtering options is one section. This table is another. But clicking on filtering options, you can actually collapse part of the table in order to hide content. So again, something you can do completely without coding, but I do recommend you explore this one. It's really nice in terms of just content and flow. Going back to the dashboard, along the same idea, one of them that I want to show you is this idea of responsive design. So using that one, it still uses the template grid, but the idea behind it is each section of the grid that's created will resize based on the size of the screen. So to show you this, let's just create yet another dashboard. I'll show you what I mean. Define a template grid, and let's just do a 2x2 kind of thing. Okay? And to make this very obvious, I'm just going to add some rectangles to it. So I'll put a rectangle in each grid. Okay, and let's just color the rectangles very quickly. That one's blue, that one's red. So these would be the charts and various visualizations that you're docking into the grid. Yellow, we have to go with green here. There we go. Perfect. So in order to make this responsive, you simply click on the dashboard, go to layout, and you'll see that there's a new responsive option that's available. And by simply turning that on, you'll see that when I open this, it resizes the elements based on the available screen size. And if I were to shrink this down, for example, if I open up the developer console really quick and render this on an iPad, right? Oh, there it is. You can see how it's positioning these top to bottom. That's a mobile phone. All right, let's see it on an iPad. Right, so now it would just stretch them out. So this will allow you to create one design of your dashboard simply by turning on this template grid and dropping content into the right areas. And then those areas will resize for you. So very easy for a win if you want to get onto multiple devices. Also good for multiple screen sizes. All right, the next example, the help overlay. This is pretty similar to one of the first things I showed you, which was the loading screen, where we have a layer that's covering the content. But this is something that you really should add to your dashboards if you have users who are not familiar with the metrics on this screen. I think this dashboard that I just created is a perfect example of it. Considering I've been pretty random with what I'm showing on here, no one has any idea why I'm showing it. So let's put a help screen on to explain it. So first of all, to launch the help screen, let's add a button, or maybe just a label to start. Let's add a label. And I'll just put it here at the top. Right? And it'll just be called help. So shrink it down a bit, go to my properties, modify the cursor so that they know they can click it, right? Make it a pointer. You notice if I hit view, yeah. So it's very obvious that something can happen. And then let's go and add a layer. So new layer, so it's just called layer 3, and I'll just call this help. And let's move that to the top. Like I said, it doesn't really matter whether it's on top or below the loading screen. But select that layer, and I'm going to start by putting a rectangle on top, like we did before. Right, I think I'll just tag it at the bottom half and keep the top part of the screen as is. Let's go to our properties, make it dark. So in my case, 80-90% opacity is probably what I want to do there. Yeah, something like that. And then let's take a label control. So just a standard label. And let's just try to explain what's going on in this chart. So I drag that on. I'll just paste some text over here into the label, which will perfectly describe this chart. And then from there, I'm just going to add essentially a close button to it. So let's add a button again. And in this case, I'm just going to put an X in the button. So that'll work, just so they know they can remove it. And with the button, we need to go to our click event, and we tell it to change layer. So when it changes layer, it's going to hide the help layer. Say OK, and let's test it. Hit view, it hides it correctly. Then we just need to change that help button that I added, because I don't think I added the script yet. Nope. And then let's just say change layer. And this one is going to show. So really nothing. You're not writing any code or anything like that. It's just use the UI that we provide in order to do something simple like click for help. All right, almost there, everyone. 2 to go. So the next one I want to show you is just very quickly that Dundas does contain a large set of hotkeys that will help you in terms of speed of implementation. So just be aware that if you do a search on the support site for keyboard shortcuts, there's a bunch of these. So even though Dundas is a web application, if you're doing a lot of dashboard development every day, learning these hotkeys will actually take you a long way. Right? You'll notice that I pretty much fly through the designer because in a lot of cases I'm using these things just to speed up. So it can take a little while. If you're not doing this every day, maybe you do want to ignore this tip, but if you are working on this constantly, it's definitely going to save you a lot of time just to know that everything exists here. And the last sample that I'm going to show you is an active piece that I'm going to add to the dashboard. And I want to show you that you can actually make selection happen within your dashboard using a single visualization. Now I'm running out of space on here, so let's just shrink that one down a bit, or maybe just get rid of it altogether. That's fine. Okay, so this is what I want to show. If we go over to our data, and I'm just going to add very quickly a view of revenue by continent, pretty similar to what I already had there. Let's grab continent. Right. I'm assuming that a lot of you have probably explored some of the interactions that we do. So you can click on a data point in order to filter the rest of the dashboard. But one thing that a lot of people ask me for is the ability to have something stay selected when it's been clicked on, so that I can see that we're showing now the dashboard for Africa or Asia or something like that. So one of the easiest ways that I found to do this is to go into the chart that you've created and add a second metric set. So you've got the first one that's giving me revenue by continent. Add another one and actually do the exact same thing you just put in there. There's continent, there's revenue. And you'll see what that's done is it's just duplicated the series in here. Now what I'm going to do is turn one of these guys into a stacked bar. And by doing that, it actually overlays the data. So the one I'm seeing right now is actually series 2. So watch this. If I take a filter now, member filter, add it to the screen, and let's hook it up to that chart. And you can see in that chart, chart 5, I have 2 metric sets, right, with the exact same content in it. I'm only going to hook it up to the second one, so the one that's sitting on top. And by doing that, if I click on Asia, for example, you'll see that the dashboard filters on Asia. In order to actually make that happen, you should probably complete the dashboard. Sorry, I skipped a step. Let's set up a filter interaction. And I'm just going to actually make this happen. So when I click on it, it's going to take the continent that I have and it's going to push it into that parameter control that I just built. And now when I do this, if I click on it, you'll see it'll highlight. Right, click on Europe, highlights. So you can also use this to drive the rest of the dashboard. This whole dashboard could be filtered using this member filter, but this one is showing me the one that's currently selected. And you could even add a label or something on top of it to say currently selected visual. But just a nice touch if you're going to do these types of filtering within the visualization. All right, everyone. At this point, I would like to thank you for attending the webinar. And I completely appreciate that I just spent the last almost 50 minutes plowing through samples showing you a whole bunch of things that you can do. So there will be a video available so you can go back and take a look at what I built. I completely understand that I did a lot of this very quickly, but I wanted to show you also a lot of different ideas. The other thing, as I said before, if you do have any questions, if you want to email them to me directly, you certainly can. It's jeffh@dundas.com again. So do feel free. And yeah, I really hope that you can take some of these ideas that I've shared with you today and incorporate them into your dashboards, just to take things to the next level. Dundas is a fabulous platform and it's so extensible, and I really love seeing people just start using these ideas and just keep pushing the envelope further and further. And if you have anything you'd love to share with me, I'd love to see that as well. If you have some neat ideas that you've implemented for yourself, always great to have those conversations. So please be in touch. And again, thank you very much for attending. Bye, everyone.